on, Keith. Am I on, folks? Everybody hear me? You got to go up or down? Tap it. Tap, tap, tap. Keith, turn me up, Keith. Hello, 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 folks. Is that good? All right. Well, if we can get Joe to sit down, we'll start this thing. Ding dong. Good morning, good morning, good morning. We're continue our lessons in how we got the Bible. We have a couple things, and I know they'll announce it later, but we're glad to have Donna back with us. I think that's Donna. So it's good to have her back. Hey, 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 how you doing? And Ruth Bennett went and had her vaccination for the COVID, but she's now really sick because of that vaccination. So we need to remember her. Larry's still in the hospital. Larry Gibson's in the hospital. Need to be praying for him. I'm sure there's others. And there'll be some other announcements that will be made later this morning. But Ron, would you lead us in a word of prayer? Amen. Well, I appreciate you praying for that ready recollection, because I need that for sure. We had for a number of weeks been studying about the Old Testament and how we got the Old Testament, and now we're going to move into the New Testament and talk about some of the history there. Again, I'll remind you, the reason why we do this is so that you can know how the Bible came about. Not an I think so, not a hunch, but that you can know. The evidence is out there. It's out there in book form. As a matter of fact, I was going to bring a couple of my books back out here this morning, but I forgot it. I had them out here when I started the class, the Geisler and Nix, and then Lightfoot. And those are two of the books that I've been using primarily for putting the lessons together. Also doing some stuff on the internet as well, but trying to put that stuff together in a condensed form where it's not too wordy, and but yet at the same time get the point across of how we got the Bible. And so, as I've mentioned numerous times, and I'll continue to mention it, for people who say that the Bible was given to us by man, well, yes, man did have something to do with it, but man was simply a scribe, or what we might call a secretary, that was simply being moved by the Holy Spirit to write these things down. The other thing is when we looked at the Old Testament and seeing the pile of evidence, I mean, it's just remarkable. And as we come into the New Testament, we're going to see, again, just a huge pile of evidence. But this time, what we're going to be looking at is just the sheer number of manuscripts that we have on the New Testament. And so that is very powerful. I know there's a lot of things I always want to share, but I get up here and then I get kind of weak-kneed and I look at people and they're looking at me and then I forget. And so we'll continue on here. So the New Testament manuscripts. Well, like the Old Testament, we're going to talk about some of the material and the form in which the New Testament came. Again, like the Old Testament, papyrus was used quite a bit in putting the New Testament together. Also parchment, and parchment is a leather, but then they also would use separate and apart from that. In other words, like a cow's leather would be considered parchment, but then they also had vellum, which was a young calf or an antelope. The skin was very soft, very subtle, very high quality skin that would last for quite a while. And so those are two of the materials that they were using during the time period of the New Testament. Then the form, as most of us know, the first form was the scroll. And so the scroll was used for quite a while. And then they went to the codex. Codex, or leaf form of book. That's basically what codex means by definition, is a book. And so those are the two forms that they use, the scroll and the codex. And as it says there, the codex came into existence around the end of the 1st century. Just to kind of get that in its context, we all know and understand that the church was established somewhere around 33 AD. So 33 AD, towards the end of the century, is when the book form or the codex came into existence. Then the method of writing we talked about in the Old Testament, the same thing in the New, is the uncials. And that was a writing that they did with large caps. And as it says here, it was used more in a formal literary documents. And then later on, they moved then to the minuscules. The minuscules came into existence around the 9th century, in other words, around 801 on up until the 9th century. So they had the minuscules. The minuscules were what we'd call our small caps, what we call handwriting today. And we got a teacher in the room here. Is that writing called cursive? He's looking at me like a deer in the headlights. But anyway, we have printing and we have writing. And what we're talking about here, as we moved into the minuscules, we have a running hand or writing. Then we have four-fold divisions of manuscripts. We have the papyri. That simply is the plural form of papyrus. All right? So we'll talk about that a little more, but the papyri. And that came into existence around the 2nd to the 8th century. And then we have the uncials coming in around 301 all the way up to the 10th century. We have the minuscules that came in somewhere around 801 to the 16th century. And then the lectionaries from about 701 up to the 15th century. We'll talk a little more about the lectionaries as we move on into the lesson. I find that the lectionaries are really very interesting, and I think they give great value to the New Testament. And we'll see that as we continue on. Then the present status of manuscripts. We have no extant original manuscripts. What that is simply saying, there is no originals that exist. That's what they mean when they say extant. So no originals exist today, but we have over 5,000 full, now it says full, we have over 5,000 full and partial Greek New Testament manuscripts that have been discovered. Again, these writings that I'm sharing with you, according to Geisler and Nix and also Lightfoot, takes us up to about 1997. So some of these figures and some of these things that we're talking about are current up to about 1997. Well, we live now in 2021, so there's still a lot of things being found, and so those numbers are changing all the time. Then we have the number of extant, or those that exist, manuscripts. The papyri, 96. And again, I told you that that word is a plural word. So, for example, they might find a papyri, plural, that might have maybe a couple of verses of the Bible. Or they might have a number of papyrus that have a chapter or a book of the Bible. But that only counts as one when they say papyri. So we have 96. So that number is a little bit confusing sometimes. But if you understand, we're talking about a plurality of material. All right, our parchment or our vellum, same principle. 299, they could find a parchment that has a Bible verse or maybe a chapter or a book. So that 299, again, is a little confusing. And the vellum is written in large cap, uncials. And so we move on to the minuscule. We have 2,812. Again, the same principle holds as the other two. Those numbers in actual fragments could be more than that. Then we have the lectionaries, same principle, 2,281, giving us a total of 5,488. Again, that's of about somewhere around 1997. So that's a pretty large number when you, again, multiply those, because, as I say, these are talking in a plural form, but those numbers are actually larger than that. Now what I've done, I'm giving you an index of the manuscripts as they are found. This is really very interesting, and I'm not going to go through each and every one because we will be here until about midnight. But what you'll see is they have the date on the far left of when these things were found, and then they identify them with a number, and then they tell you basically what was found when they found that particular manuscript. And so as you look at this first page, we're looking at a singular form, a papyrus. But then as we move on to another page, we see again the date in which they're found, how they identified them, and then what was found in that particular papyrus. And as you can see by looking up here, here's a portion of Luke and John. Here's fragments of James, Revelation, and so forth. Here we have the four Gospels and Acts all found here. So again, they could vary in what these manuscripts have. We continue on to another page, and what's interesting, Jump back here. All right. So here we have papyrus, but now we're getting into codex. Codex, again, as I mentioned, is the book form. And so when they're finding these manuscripts, they're finding these different books. And so they have the Sinaiticus here, which contains the entire New Testament. Well, that's huge. Has the entire New Testament. Found, in the area of Sinai. And then they have here the Vaticanus, and it contains the majority of the New Testament. Okay, now that word right there might have some similarity to you. I pronounced it a while ago, Vaticanus. In other words, the Vatican. Most of you are familiar with the Vatican. And so the Vatican is connected to Catholicism. Now, if you don't understand what Catholicism is, Catholics. So the Catholics, what's interesting, the Catholics, they had these manuscripts for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years and would not make it known or release them to the public. And so we finally learned about them and they were released. And so, again, what's powerful is you can take this and start to find out, as we have in the Old Testament, a word for word. And again, as I'm sharing this with you, I'm trying to get you to understand that the Bible was not just given to us by a man or men, because what we're looking at here in these manuscripts, these things are found over periods of years. They're written by different individuals. They're written in different parts of the world. And as we bring them together, voila, we have a Bible that is a perfect book. Perfect in grammar, in history, in geographic locations, in science, in astrology, in the medical field, and I can go on and on and on. There's just a lot of stuff that we had no clue of until we found the book. How they would know the copy from an original? Yeah. The question is, did these individuals know how to distinguish these copies from the original? Well, when we was looking in one of the last lessons of the Old Testament, we went through some of the different ways that they did their testing. One of them was carbon dating. And so they would be able to take something that they knew existed in a certain period of time, carbon date it, and then same way with the manuscripts, take the manuscripts and see if that carbon dating matched it. Also, as we talked about, when they found a lot of these manuscripts, well, they would find other articles, like the clay jars and stuff. And so they would be able to tell by the way the jar was made, the style of jar, some of the inscriptions on the jar, some of the artwork on the jar. They knew then the period of that jar in which the manuscript was in. So that was a second way of dating. Another way that they dated was by handwriting itself. Because as we advance through time, handwriting changes. And so they would be able then to date things according to the handwriting. And then in the way that they spoke, they would also be able to tell what time period that certain things would be found. So those are just four. I made that all up. It's not true. No. But that's a good question. All right. So we see the different codexes, again, where they were found. And so we're beginning to multiply in the number of manuscripts we have in the New Testament. We continue on and we see we got more and more books. And again, there's the entire New Testament. Entire New Testament. We come on down. Here we got the Pauline epistles, in other words, the letters from Paul. We have portions of Luke and John. Again, portions of Luke and John. Down here we have Acts and the letters from Paul and the general epistles. So the evidence just keeps mounting up and up and up. And again, it doesn't contradict itself. It doesn't contradict itself. We're finding that these are, again, by various writers during various times in history and different parts of the world, finding this stuff. Again, we continue on. We got more and more books. And we have here the Gospels and the book of Acts. We have the letters of Paul. The book of Acts, the letters of Paul, the Gospels. And so, I mean, this is just incredible information. You can take an individual, you can take one individual that's very intelligent and tell them to sit down and write a book that's somewhat in comparison to the Bible, or take 10 of those individuals and tell them to come together and write a book, and we want you to write in that book what the history of this country is going to be for the next 20 years. Now, I know that you know this. There's no way that you take one individual or even 20 of the smartest individuals with laptops, computers, and all the technology we have today and write a book like the Bible, and 20 years later, everything they write in is going to be true. Ain't going to happen. And yet the Bible has done that over hundreds of years and thousands of years. Most of us know, just the prophecies that are found in the Old Testament are huge, and they all came true. They all came true. I don't care how many people you put together today to write things like that. They'll never get it done. It will not happen. All right, we continue on, going through the inventory of manuscripts. Again, we have a huge number of books that are found, when they were found, what they contain. There's the book of Matthew, the book of Luke, the Gospels, the Gospels, the Gospels, the Gospels. Here we go. We continue on through the annals of time. We're finding more and more books. Again, we find the letters of Paul, the Gospels, the book of Acts, the epistles, the book of Romans, the Gospels. I just keep putting sheet after sheet after sheet of books that are being found in different parts of the world at different times in history. And these books all are in unity of purpose and teaching. Scholars. Now, what I did here on this particular page, I went to the internet. Like I said, the stuff that I've been giving you has been basically stuff that you find out of Geisler, Nix, and Lightfoot, which brings it up to 1997. So I thought, well, I go to the internet. And so we have up here, back up. We have scholars use different sources such as the Leuven database, or the Center for the Study of the New Testament Manuscripts. And then basically what they do, they say we list the numbers for other classical works and specific biblical manuscripts in the updated evidence. Now we're going to look at those numbers. In the Greek manuscripts, we total somewhere around 5,856 that they found in the Greek manuscripts. The earliest manuscript that they found was dated 130 A.D., and then there's the classification for it. And then the non-Greek manuscripts, which are the Armenian and the Latin and etc., those number in 18,130 plus, giving us a grand total of 23,986 manuscripts. That's just crazy. And those numbers just keep escalating in the evidence that we have showing the validity of the Bible. And then I'm giving you just basically some copies of what they're finding when they find these manuscripts. There's another copy. Here's a codex, and if you look on there, 773 pages of this is found. All right? Another copy of the Sinaiticus. Now, the lectionaries. This, I think, is powerful. The lectionaries. It says lectionaries are manuscripts containing portions of biblical texts for reading in church services, New Testament lessons from the Gospels and epistles are arranged not in order of the New Testament canon, but in accordance either with the church year, called a Sinaiticarian or something like that. The Lexians vary in length from a few verses to a few chapters, with a customary length of about 10 verses. Carefully copied from an explanatory, lectionary. When they say explanatory, in other words, they're going back to a particular manuscript which they've already confirmed to be accurate, fitting the time, the date, the context, and that's what they're talking about there. And then basically the Byzantine text type. Byzantine is basically going back to the Byzantine era, and we do the same thing. You can go to different places in the country, and you can go to, like you go to Washington, D.C., and you see a lot of the buildings and everything. A lot of their structures will look something similar to Roman architecture and different things like that. And that's basically what they're saying about the writings in the lectionaries. They are similar to the Byzantine era. Lectionary, New Testament manuscripts in Greek number around 2,200, of which nearly 90 are minuscule, and the rest uncials. And then it goes on and says two uncial lectionaries date as early as the 4th and the 5th century. About 7 more in the 6th century and the 7th century, yada, 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 yada. Here's my point. He tells us what the lectionaries are. In other words, basically what I'm doing right now is I'm giving you a lecture. And I have put my lecture together on a PowerPoint. So the PowerPoint could be considered a lectionary. All right? Now here's my point. Here's the power of the lectionaries. Because we already talked about the manuscripts. And we already talked about, about the codexes. If you took in this country or in the world, if you took in the world and gathered up every Bible gathered up every Bible, go in every church building, every church office, every church library, every home, every building, and you gathered up every Bible and burned them all, you would not destroy the Bible. Because you would be able to go back into the writings of man. Because there are individuals that have written book after book after book about the Bible. Even the atheists will quote the Bible. And you can go back into those books and find a quotation and take those quotations, and over a period of time you'll be able to put those verses all back together, chapters, books, and within a very short time we'd have the Bible again. That's the power of the lectionaries. Because that's what they have found. They have found all of these manuscripts, all these books in separate form, in a scripture. But to go to the lectionaries, and here's a man giving a lecture, doing as I'm doing, and they find his material, and they find that they can take those lessons that he's put together and confirm what's in the Bible to be the truth. That's what's powerful about the lectionaries. I'm done. Pardon?
Some of those versions didn't match word for word or verse for verse.
Right.
So there were some differences in all those, and I never saw that as a problem because it never really changed the intent of anything, but it did over the years or centuries. Some
And but as I was talking, because of the sheer number of manuscripts that we have, and because of the lectionaries, people were able then to be able to put things together and get the correct wording, the correct message, the correct thought, by just the sheer number of material that they had. And as Jim pointed out, that even in some of those that didn't match, that they still carried the same basic context. And so again, that's the power of the sheer number of manuscripts that we have and having the lectionaries. And that same thing would be true, as I just mentioned, if you destroyed every Bible and you'd start going into different books that people had written and different materials and notes that they'd written and start putting them things together, you're going to find that some of that's not going to match either. Why? Because you might find it in the King James Version. You might find it in the Living Bible Version. You might find it in the Book of Mormon. You might find, so you get what I'm saying? And so as you put all that stuff together and start to examine it, eventually you're going to be able then to weed out the error and get the truth put back together. Any other comments? Wayne?